Good morning, everyone. I'll have a little bit different perspective because coming from the private sector. But before I start off my presentation today, it's very interesting to know, most of the airlines across the world, do you know any airline company which is making profit? Except Singapore Airlines? None. So what is driving it? Why people are investing into airline industry? The answer is growth. That's what most of the economists look for. They look for a sector which has got inherent potential of growth. Interestingly, you have a place called Minneapolis in US. The entire city has been created only to serve an airline hub. 98% of the people who fly into Minneapolis actually move out somewhere else. It's a transit hub. The entire city is 10,000 people. And the entire city is concentrated to only serve the airline, nothing else. So because it created growth economy in Minneapolis. That was the whole idea. Renewables is also like that. Sustainable energy is also like that. They promise inherent growth in a sector, a new sector. There is enough capital in the world market. The problem is, where do you divert this capital? In a sector that has got inherent growth. Profitability comes later. Obviously it comes. It definitely comes in, because if private sector is to invest into it, they'll look at viabilities and profitabilities. But more so for the government. If you are identifying a sector, you identify a sector, you create public policy frameworks, regulations, policies, because there's inherent growth in the sector. And because of the growth, there's a trickle-down effect that happens in the economy. If you put up renewable energy projects, wind energy projects, hydro projects, it's just not the project that comes up. It also creates ancillary investments, indirect employment, and overall growth in the economy, which would trigger a larger picture. And that is what exactly that has happened in India as far as renewables is concerned. Since we have about 10 to 12 minutes to discuss, I'm not going to discuss about what's happening globally over here, but I'll take India as a case study. And Switzerland has been introduced. We are the 5th largest wind turbine manufacturers in the world. India is the largest. It's a home ground for us, but we operate in 32 countries across the world. Okay. No doubt, this is a typical slide any renewable energy person would show you, but I think there's no doubt to it that renewables is the way forward. Why? Because of two reasons. Most of the developing countries, like for example India, we are having very less resource as far as fossil fuel is concerned. And if India was to consume the per capita energy requirement of average developed country, I think the run will anyway run out of fossil fuel, and I think the fossil fuel prices would shoot up in such a manner that I don't think it's going to be affordable. On the other side, renewables is available inherently within. So there is no issue of tapping those sources, because it makes a great sense to use it in terms of balance of payments also on the one side. On the second thing, there's inherent growth, because if renewables are exploited, you create a different type of growth dynamics in the country itself. On the other side, what we can say is fossil fuel can be utilized whenever you want it. So better conserve it. While renewables, once it's gone, it's gone. I mean to say, today's sunlight is gone, it's gone forever. But you can always take out oil tomorrow. So let's conserve the fossil fuel for some time, because we might use that. But renewables, it's gone, it's gone. Particularly, India is a very unique case. Again, talking about technology transfer, wind energy defies this logic of technology transfer. Wind power never had any issues of technology transfer. Why? It's very simple, because the industry is so much focused in putting up projects over here that it's a commercial decision. If it makes sense to put up a technology over here, the technology transfer happens, because there's an inherent growth imperative in it, or profitability over there. Particularly in India, we had no issues on technology transfer as wind is concerned from last 15 years. And practically every company in the world, every technology in the world is there in India, either through a joint venture or through a subsidiary or through a technology license. Now that's the normal thing that would happen. It's just not wind in India. You have small hydro in Sri Lanka. You have bagasse coal generation in Mauritius. Things have happened, and absolutely no technology transfer issues. So what's the real thing? If the industry gets involved and understands there's a long-term view to it, there's a growth over there, I think technology transfer becomes a back burner because commercial imperatives take the front. Particularly India, we did something great a couple of years back. We are maybe the only country that has a ministry for renewable energy, a separate minister, a separate department, a separate program. And last year, India added about 3 gigawatt of wind power projects in one financial year, which had been a record till now. And on the government on its side uses multiple policy instruments. We have practically every policy instrument present in India as far as wind is concerned. We have the feed-in tariff, we also have competitive bidding, we have the RE certificates, which is a market-based instrument. We have auctions, we have generation bid incentives, because practically everything what a bid can contain. The advantage is the market or the players can use the right instrument which is suitable to them. So you give everything on a platter and let the market pick up whatever they want. But finally, at the end of the day, installations has to happen, market has to grow. There is an evolution of renewable energy internationally, which is also the case with India. The last 2 decades, as you know, it's dependent on public, obviously renewables, since it's a fringe player, it's not a mainstream, it's highly dependent on public policy framework and regulations. Just by wind, any business, be it whatever mature it is based on public policy and regulations. But more so renewables because it is at a nascent stage. It's also dependent on market models developed by various stakeholders. India has been a matured market by now, but if you're going to open up a new market, you have to be very careful on what policy framework you want to put up, otherwise market would just reject it. And also dependent on technology robustness. This is the things that the government has to look into, that bad technology should not come in, and good technology is coming, that's fine. And various governments have, this is the pointer? Yeah. Various government implemented incentive schemes to stimulate markets to achieve targets. The governments have put targets 5%, 10%, 20%, depends. It's a political will. But in order to achieve these numbers, you require certain schemes. For example, feed-in tariffs is the most common scheme used across the world and the most effective. It's, as they call it, KISS, keep it simple and stupid. That's what they say. That you just put up a project, you feed electricity to the grid, and you get a feed-in tariff for that. And KISS has been very, very practical, be it India, be it Germany, be it Spain, wherever. You also need to have a host of fiscal incentives and investment subsidies. Obviously, it would vary for a country to country, but this needs to be there if you want to involve the private sector to come in. And finally, you can have a market-based mechanism after a certain maturity level, so that you no longer want to, in a way, give a preferential treatment to a particular sector, but let it align with the market and get it mainstream to have a grid parity. And a couple of governments have through public policies fixed targets list. For example, India has put 15% by 2020. Now they're talking about 2032 over here. China had done 10% a couple of years back. Europe is talking about 20%, 30%. These are political will, which is very important to drive the entire markets in the future. This is the state of status of renewables in India. As you can say, wind power, which represents 70%, is close to 18 gigawatt of the total capacities of renewables in India. The total wind renewable capacity is about 26,000 megawatts as on December 2012. And this is if you go by the 5-year plan which the government has formulated, the next 5 years by 2017, we will add another 30,000 megawatt to this, which will make the numbers to 56,000 megawatt. And always what has happened in the past is the government plan targets have been beaten always by the markets. So you might have actually much more than 30,000 megawatt getting added in India over the next 5 years. Coming to technology, there has been an evolvement of technology, particularly for wind power. In the early 80s, you had turbine of less than 100 kilowatt, and this is how it has gone up. It's now one turbine on an average is about 3.5 megawatt. at least in the developed world. As far as India is concerned, the average size is now 1.5, 1.6 megawatt because of infrastructural constraints and logistics challenges. And there are advantages of large size turbines. Why the turbine size is going up is, that is because you get the latest design techniques, and there is a fair amount of material research which brings in economies of scale for one single turbine, so that the cost of generation comes down. And also land is a constraint in all countries including India, and we have a larger turbine, it uses less land per megawatts. So that's how there's a trend towards larger turbines now coming up across the world. And this is how the entire product cycle has been working. This is just an academic chart, very don't go by the real numbers. This is something that I conceived and try to plot it over here. Essentially, why the question was why you're going for higher sizes, because wind energy output is the function of wind speed and rotor swept area. The larger the wind rotor, the larger is the capture of the wind. So you get more electricity out of it. And economies of scale in increasing how bad? Because when you have a larger turbine, you go up in height and you can capture wind speeds which are faster. So then you can capture again more wind and have lower cost per kilowatt hour. This is the reason that the sizes are going up. Okay, this is a slide which I would like to put a little bit of time in it, because this is essentially the case study I was talking about India, how things has happened in India, how things have grown in India, and what is the consistency that the government has been showing. Indian wind program started way back in 1992-93. And you had the National Wind Resource Monitoring and Demonstration Program. That's when the government came in, put up a huge amount of meteorological masts across India to map wind, where all wind are there, how the quality of the wind and all. And after that, the government was convinced, fairly convinced, that there is a fair amount of wind potential in India, and we should try to put up a policy so that private sector can come in and invest projects and get paid off. So they came with national guidelines for tariffs and interconnection for captive and third-party sales. India is one unique country where you have a captive power policy, where a user can put his own power project, use the transmission grid to transmit electricity and consume it on a self basis. So that's the particular policy framework in India. So there was a national guideline for that, and this national guideline was taken very positively by the market. As you can see, there was hardly any installation in 93-94. And it just shoots up over here. And India actually became the third largest wind producing country in the world in 96-97. And then there was a downfall, as you can see. This downfall was used to a variety of reasons. There used to be a fly-by-night operators that had came on because they want to just cash in the market opportunity that normally happens. At the same time, Indian economy was on a downturn. You had issues of profitability for basic markets itself. You had higher interest rates going up, and there was a shakeout in the entire thing. Apart from that, you had the power sector in India, which is the main sector under which the entire ambit was working, was under transformation. We had to unbundle the electricity boards into generation, transmission, distribution company. We had the emergence of regulatory commissions coming up. There was a huge amount of chaos. So there was a downfall over here. However, there has been a steady growth like this. In the last 10 years, the wind sector in India has grown at 27% CAGR. So what's the reason behind it? In 2001, once the regulatory commissions had established, the legal framework was in place, people started having a new hopes on the wind power, number one. Number two, the people who were left out, the fly-by-night operators were out, the serious people were there. That they wanted to actually turn around the entire wind model in India. And in 2003, you had the passage of Electricity Act 2003 in India, which had a specific mandate for every regulatory commission to procure certain percentage coming from renewables by the distribution company. Now this triggered a huge wave for the future. The industry came to know, fine, this is going to be a long-term story. Let's start investing a lot into it. So a huge amount of investment started coming from the private sector for development of wind farm projects, procurement of land, doing data monitoring, putting up transmission lines, upgrading the manufacturing facilities, and lot many things. and you see a steady growth happening over here. Apart from that, there were a couple of things like, Kyoto Protocol got established, so again a higher hope amongst the sector. We had percentage fixation by the regulatory commissions, and a feed-in tariff was introduced in India by a variety of regulatory commissions. And also the consolidation of energy stakeholders also happened. And finally, in 2009, the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission also prescribed the tariff regulations for wind power across India. So there was more and more acceptability of renewables as a real story as far as India is concerned, and that's the reason that the growth was happening. Obviously, there is a negative growth in the last year, which there are reasons for that, because we had moved from the old plan to the new plan. So a couple of policies were not extended in time, but I think it's, as we know, as from the government statements, it would be reinstated. So next year again, you'll have a positive growth. Now, what is the regulatory imperatives for renewables as far as India is concerned? We moved on a preferential tariff, which you call normally known as feed-in tariff globally, which is a cost-plus tariff with a short return on investment, so that there is a basic minimum return required for an investor to come in, he'll get an assured return. RPO obligation. It's a mandatory purchase from renewables as a percentage of the total consumption in the distribution area. In 2008, the then Prime Minister, through its Prime Minister's Advisory Council, came out with a policy document called National Action Plan on Climate Change. This is a vision statement of Government of India to combat climate change, global warming, and it mandates 5% national RPS by 2010, increasing 1% every year till 2020. And this also helped to create a nationwide TRECs market, which is transferable renewable energy credits certificates. So you can, if there's a particular state, India is a federal country, if a particular state is surplus in renewables, it can trade certificates to another state which is deficient to still meet the national goal. As far as wind is concerned, the government also introduced a generation-based incentive, that if you generate more, you get a certain amount of feed-in tariff from the central government to again prop up the investments and higher performance. As I said, you have a central tariff regulation in place and an RS certificate is also in place. These are the instruments which are now working in India. And just to give you in perspective, although this is in rupees, Indian rupees, but it shows you different states that have got wind potential in India and how the tariffs have been changing. As you see, there's an upward revision in tariffs practically every periodic shift. So that too, although it also then inculcates the disadvantages of inflation, and the higher interest rate gets reflected by increase of tariff, so that the business continues as usual. This is the CERC tariff regulation. Again, a bird's eye view. What the Central Commission has said is there are 4 zones in India, or 5 zones in India of different wind density, and based on the density, there are the tariffs attuned to it. Again, this is what I would like to show over here is the huge amount of activity has been done by the government, and the private sector watches it very carefully and tries to react to it by investments into these projects. Most interesting is the RE certificate trading. The entire RE certificate trading concept in India was borrowed from UK and Australia. UK, you have the ROCs market, the renewable obligation certificates market, and in Australia you have the MRET market, which is a mandatory renewable energy trade market. So we also borrowed the same concept from there. We started the trading in India in March 2011, and there is a floor price and a forbearance price, so that there is no cartelization and there's a minimum return given to any investor. As of now, 23 trading sessions have happened in India. Every month there's a trading for REC trading, where the buyers and sellers come in, and so much of RECs have been issued by now, and so many have been redeemed. In essence, this is functioning today. We thought it would never function. It's too futuristic for India, but it's working. so much of electricity is, the demand is going to be there. And if we take project and 50% coming from wind itself, wind would have a potential of close to 50 gigawatt by 2020. That means there's huge market available. That's what again the market looks at. There is a market, there's no issue, we invest into it, no problem. There is going to be a long-term view. Anyway, I'm coming to my last slide. No doubt renewable energy plays a key role in mitigating global warming. I don't think that's a debate. More so, I view it differently. It shows a new trajectory for growth for most of the developing countries. And that's where I think one should concentrate on. I think the rest of the thing is too technical in nature as far as the India market is concerned. But yes, any questions at the later, I'll be there.